candid conversations, unfiltered opinions, and humor with Avag Beck's podcast.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to a great episode, another great one. Today, I have Matt with me, and we are going to talk about a topic that most of us shy away from, which is essential to our everyday living. Actually, I would dare to say is one of those basic physiologic needs, right, that we all have as human beings, right? So Matt here is a health and sex researcher. So we're going to talk about, you guessed it, sex. So
Yay.
How does that relate to our everyday life of health and overall well-being? Is it necessary? Is it not? So Matt, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Thank you. That was really great. Thank you so much. Oh, I'm fantastic. Thank you.
Great to hear.
I've coached over 80,000 men over the years. 80,000 is a lot. And I've learned a few things, not many, but a few. And I'd love to share some of it. I think it'll really be interesting for you. And anything you want to ask me is fine. There's nothing off the table. Everything is totally cool with me, So, you asked a great question. Is it necessary? Do we have to have sex? And I would argue that we do. I think the problem today is that we have screens that take the place of people. So many men and women are using porn and social media, and it satisfies some of our basic needs enough that we don't really get the energy to go out there, develop social skills, do dating, meet people, real physical people. And I think that's a terrible issue today. Don't you think?
I think so too. And like anything else that is addicting in nature, it's hard to break away from, and it often causes a rift in, say, there was already an established relationship. The gratification or the instant gratification gotten from social media or pornography can actually be detrimental to something that, could be a lifelong healthy relationship.
Right.
You mentioned you've coached a lot of men. Do you find that men, who are visual creatures, the creatures of what they see and, they're attracted physically to a person. Do you think that men are more susceptible to an addiction to, say, pornography or visual sex enticing tools?
Yeah, that's a great question. So as we grow up, generally during early adolescence through to early adulthood, like say between generally around 11 or 12 to 25, that's when we develop the imprinting in our brains around the sexual preferences that we have. It's kind of like what kind of our brain gets wired during that critical period to a certain way of having sex. And it used to be, I was born, quite a while ago. We didn't have anything other than magazines or occasionally a dirty movie that somebody's father would have lying around. But generally, we didn't have much of anything other than fantasy to masturbate to. And we had experiences with, in my case, with girls that, those real experiences. So my brain was wired towards real sex. And so are girls' brains wired to real sex. Now, fast forward, let's say you're born from about 1985 on, maybe 1990. Now you've grown up where there's pornography plentifully online and the wire and social media, and the wiring during that critical period from 12 to 25 years old, the wiring is now wiring towards watching other people have sex. It's voyeurism, really, rather than our own experiences. And it happens just as much for women as for men, just as much. And in fact, the faster growing segment of porn users are women. Women didn't used to use that much porn, but now they use a lot of porn, actually. And they're wired just as much to porn. So I talk to men when they do have sex with women that are of a certain age. The women want to recreate the scenes in porn that they find most appealing. And they want to have very rough sex typically. And they don't really have the element of love and romance in it because it's a mechanical, robotic kind of a function where you kind of get off. And the whole part of love and romance is lost. They're just not, the wiring developed before they developed that. And it's a sad thing. It can be undone, but it's something that we have to be aware of. And if you're a man and you're dating younger women or you're dating women of a certain age, you have to realize that they're wired that way too.
Right. So what do you think has caused the shift to where women are now like the fast growing portion of the population now utilizing a lot of pornography material?
Well, I think it has to do with feminization of men and the masculinization of women, honestly.
Okay.
In the older days, sex roles were very clear. I'm not saying it was the best thing in the world. It wasn't. Women were going to be, go from daughters to mothers, basically. And they had a very, feminine role, and it wasn't expected that they would love sex. But then the pill came along in the early 1960s, and the sexual revolution, and what they used to call women's lib, and all of that. And we're long past that. So now, women are allowed socially to have an enjoyment of sex the same as men. And women do enjoy sex as much or more than men, actually. So it just, the roles that were imposed were removed. And so now women have been enjoying this newfound freedom, which has a lot of benefits for women, really. They don't have to worry about getting pregnant if they don't want to.
Right.
But the other side of the coin is that women have gotten dragged into the same morass of porn and social media as men have, and have suffered exactly the same way as men have.
So what would you say the critical thing that you see in all the people that you've worked and coached, right? What is the one critical thing that you see it's not satisfied? Because yes, pornography materials are there and they can, give that instant gratification. However, it still doesn't replace having a human or person or having that physical interaction with another person, right? So what do you think, or what have you seen has been the core thing where people feel like they're missing out and they're seeking help for? What is the one thing that most people complain of?
Yeah. So when I started really seeing this phenomenon was around 2012, when I started getting a lot of coaching requests from young men. Previously, my core audience were people that were men who were 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, and even in their 90s.
Right.
Who had erectile dysfunction, who had some health and sex issues. They wanted to be able to have good sex. And that's still a core group that I work with. But we had, from 2012, we started getting a lot of young men who said, I have total erectile dysfunction. I can't get an erection. And it turns out they didn't understand it till, the connection became clear that overuse of porn in many men would cause them to lose the ability to have successful intercourse or a sexual relationship with a partner. They were just so wired to pixels during that formative period, those years I talked about from around 12 to 25 years old, that they had no ability to actually have sex with a real flesh and blood person. And we found that, there was a withdrawal period. And one of the things that seemed to help a lot was, have you heard of the NoFap movement?
Yes.
So, that started from what we were doing. These guys started, we said, why don't you start a community of guys? And they went on Reddit, and there's some forums. And there's hundreds of thousands of guys. And they found that really not having any type of ejaculatory orgasm, fantasy, sex for a while would allow their brain to sort of settle down, and the wiring could then take place along the lines of real partner and real people. It took a while. I have a guy, for example, he was about, let's say, I think in his late 30s.
Okay.
And he had never had sex successfully with a woman ever in his life. He was attracted to women, but he never could have sex with them successfully. And we worked with him for about a year. I worked with him, and there were some relapses, some issues, but then he was able to do just fine. And he was just absolutely went crazy and just loved it. And it was like completely fixed everything. And what happens with what I do is, when I do things right, I hear back from someone once or twice, and then they go off in the real world and they don't want to have anything to do with what we're doing anymore, which, they've graduated. But I did hear from him a few times, and that was a, very typical story. It could take 6 months, a year to rewire the brain around real people. But in the meantime, I really think, sadly, that online porn and social media do take the place of real interactions enough that so many people are not ever going to go out in the real world. That's why there's so much less dating than there was. That both men and women on YouTube are saying, oh, why date? It's useless. You're not going to meet anybody. There's all these problems. There's the red pill movement where men are telling other men, don't bother. Women are just here to take advantage of you. Just don't do it. And there's a collapse of men meeting women. You go out, and if I go out to where I live and I see women together, men together, very few couples anymore. Not nearly as many as you used to see, really. And so I think, unfortunately, the electronic systems that we have do wire our brains to substitute for real relationships. And unless people make a conscious decision to fix that, which is not an easy thing, that they're not going to get over it. And I'd say it's exactly the same as quitting alcohol. If you had a problem with alcohol, quitting cocaine, if you have a problem with cocaine, there's a period where you quit. For example, the men would stop masturbation completely, would stop porn, would stop fantasy.
Right.
They would go through what they call a flat line, where everything is gray, the whole world is boring, everything's just tedious. There's nothing that gives any pleasure.
Right.
This is exactly what alcoholics describe when they quit drinking.
Withdrawal, yeah.
It's exactly the same. And they get through that period, and if they get through that period, they start wanting to meet people in the real world. And everything becomes normal again, like it used to be, or like it should be again. And they now can have very good and successful relationships, as long as they don't go back and relapse to the online world.
Right. So, you talked about the subset of men who are, maybe younger, trying to navigate the real world and maybe have a relationship of sort, right? So do you also maybe sometimes get a subset of men who are married, maybe have a family, but, the addiction to porn is causing a problem in their intimate relationship where either they despise their partners, right? Or cannot hold, an erection because of the fantasy of pornography and the sentiments of pornography, or just not being able to detach from the fantasy into the real world context, and facing like dissatisfaction from their partners and maybe a divorce. Have you met?
Well, that's a great point. So there's a timeline to this. That's a great point. The first part of it is the first 8 months to a year of a relationship, which I call the honeymoon period.
Yes.
It doesn't have to do with whether you're married or not. It's just presumably you're having sex, you meet someone, they're exciting, everything's very exciting and wonderful. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. That's totally normal. But what's also normal is that the hormonal drives for that subside. And there's actually a counter to that, which makes people dissatisfied with their partner and unhappy with their relationship, usually within 8 months to a year. Now, there's ways around that, but that's how nature made us. We kind of tend to be, the honeymoon period wears off. Hopefully, there's a person that you have a companionship with, that you like that person, that you enjoy some of the things they enjoy, and you like spending time with them, that you're in love with them, hopefully by then, even though the sex isn't exciting anymore. Then, if you get past that period, 8 or 9 years, 7 to 9 years later, most marriages will end by about that time. Most relationships are over, because at that point, oh my gosh, this is boring person. And porn is so much more exciting, and she won't do any of the things that I see in porn, and her body's not like the porn people that I really like. And that's why the average length of time for a marriage is anywhere from 7 to 9 years. Now, if they get past that, which people do, generally they have children, they have a base, a foundation of the relationship that goes, far beyond sex, obviously. They may or may not be having that much sex, but now, like I was in my office, my home office, basically masturbating to porn every night when my wife was already sleeping. That was our life. She didn't realize that I was doing it, but I was, and I wasn't that happy. And maybe then around 25 years in, and this is like the normal time. Like if you last past the 8 or 9 year period, sometimes you go 25 years. Do you ever wonder why people break a marriage up after 25 years? Like you think, don't they already know they like that person?
Right.
And yet a lot of marriages end then, somewhere around there. Well, that's because people go, well, I'm 45, whatever, 50. I only have so many more years left. This is boring. I get what this is. I want to sow some wild oats.
Right.
I want to do some of those things that she won't do. I want to explore. And life is very short. And that's why a lot of marriages end there. So that was my situation. And I found a whole different program that's built into all of our brains that normally we don't really uncover, that allowed me to have sex in a way that completely made my partner amazing again, better than ever. And it's gotten better and better to this day. And I teach a lot of men this, and they teach their wives or their girlfriends this, and they just never want to go back. I call it nirvana sex, which is, I don't mean to offend Hindus. It's just our Western word for joy. It's like the love that builds, and it's indescribable. And it's through sex that this happens. It's hormonal, and it works just as well for men and women. I had a couple that were about 70, and this is not that uncommon, Adonga said. The woman had never had an orgasm, never had an orgasm. And they started this type of sex, and she started having an orgasm after orgasm after orgasm, and they have sex for hours at a time, and it just opened up her life. You never could have believed that this was ever even possible. And, once again, I heard from him, the husband, 3 or 4 times. It was just every story was better than the last, and then he faded away because, they've solved their problem, they move on, which is nice.
Right.
But women, when they discover this type of sex exists, it's no longer a 3-minute or 5-minute event. Intercourse generally really only lasts a few minutes by the time people are really into it. And so women, it's like their sexual space is very small, sort of constrained by the penis and, how long the man lasts. And, it becomes somewhat of a tedium for a lot of women too. And a lot of married women or women together for a long time, they're not that interested in sex anymore. It doesn't serve them very well anymore. And so with nirvana sex, I found that it creates this enormous love and this wellspring of loving feelings. It just gets better and better. And for women, it's common for them to become interested in sex again and explore their sexual space and start becoming multi-orgasmic and all of that. It's very, very common. Right. And the love, and it's just indescribable, really. And it just gets better and better. And it's hormonal. Have you heard of the hormone called oxytocin? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so everyone says, oh, it's the love hormone. It sort of is. But when you do certain things to build up oxytocin, it creates an indescribable loving feeling. And you never want to go to porn. It also helps you shake other addictions to alcohol or drugs or porn. It just makes life work so effortlessly. And if people could see that this is possible with sex, they would never want to use porn, and they would be seeking out a partner. And this is such a joyful and wonderful way to live. And that's what I teach in much of my work.
That's great. So have you found people who say at the point of, the year 25 of their marriage, they're like, okay, her body is older. I need like a younger model of, the woman that I had. And, I think we better divorce. And when they actually get out there, they have dissatisfaction that maybe leads to regret, whether it's the man or woman, right? Have you had those cases, and how can a person recover from realizing that fantasy is not actually reality?
Yeah, that's a great point. So let's say it's very common, a man or woman, they're dissatisfied. I mean, I think most divorces, like 80% of divorces, are initiated by women. I mean, women can be dissatisfied. Men will keep going, as women tend to say, I got to get out of this, So if people want to kick the fantasy, kick the porn, and they have a partner, all they have to really do, and I know this is like super simple, and you're going to say, oh, that's too easy, Matt. It can't be that easy. But really all it is cuddling every day. Like if you're watching TV and you're on, 2 sides of the couch, you get on each, he gets on her side of the couch. They're together, legs draped over each other. All it is cuddling. Naked cuddling is better. Not having sex really, but cuddling.
That's hard.
Yeah. Well, for men, one thing leads to another. What I always did was I was always calculating, how do I get my wife into bed? How do I get her to have sex with me today? It's like all men do that. It's like, and so it created a manipulative feeling I didn't enjoy, but I love sex so much that I was that manipulative. So what I suggest is scheduling. So you have sex days and cuddling days. And then everybody knows like what's on the table and what's not. And then you could do the cuddling and, tomorrow we're going to have sex. Today we're cuddling. And it becomes better and better. It just becomes incredible, actually, because the oxytocin builds up. And for men, there's one essential part of this that's super important. That's a little bit less important for women, but it's still important. But for men, it's the ejaculation. Have you heard of the orgasm cycle, Adongasit? The orgasm cycle? So, there's a period of fallout. The oxytocin lowers. After an orgasm, we become less attracted to our partner, called the Coolidge effect. Everyone thinks that sex brings people together, but it actually can drive them apart. So when you've had an orgasm, you start looking at other people as more interesting than your partner. There's a moodiness that happens sometimes. People, and I notice it myself, there's like an edginess emotional, it's not much fun. And that can go on for even up to like a week. I've kept a journal of it. And hormonally, especially for women, it can go for about a week. For men, it generally lasts for a day or two. And so if men have a lot of sex and cuddling and they don't ejaculate each time, it opens up this nirvana sex, and it's so much better. And now men always say, when I say that, they go, Matt, what is the point? I'm going to have sex. I want to come. I mean, if that's the best part, why bother with it otherwise? Well, that's what you think when you haven't tried this. But when you try it, and you, as a man, you're not always ejaculating, maybe every third time or every fourth time or every 3 days or every four, depending on your health and how your age and all of that, really. You'll find that you start really seeing your partner as more and more attractive and wonderful. And that's what nirvana sex is about. And it expands your love that's in your heart. Your heart gets bigger and you just love your partner so much more. And there's no issues or arguments that can't easily be solved. It just makes everything the way everybody dreams a relationship should be. And that's why I started doing this, because I wanted to spread the word to men and women and get people to understand this program already exists in our brains, but we just didn't learn it. We just learned because, as men and women, we masturbate. We learn that orgasm, it feels good. That we got a partner. It's like, that's natural. You view sex as a way of getting each other off. But it's really not. There's another program, the oxytocin program, I call it. And it's being happy with what you have, loving what you have, loving your partner, not wanting anything new. The other path we have in our brains is the dopamine track. Dopamine is an important part of the reward circuit in our brain. It's the hormone of want, of craving, of wanting more, of wanting novelty. Dopamine is what drives us on social media to click on the next video on TikTok or the next reel on Facebook or the next short on YouTube, the next posting. Dopamine, we want the next thing, the new thing, the new thing, the new thing. Then our brain gets used to that dopamine level and it stops being sensitive to it anymore. So the stimulus that would get you off, and it doesn't mean sexually necessarily, it could be an interesting video or something, no longer interests you. You go, I've seen that already. That's boring. So you have to keep escalating.
Yeah.
Well, that's the advice that I heard people always gave to couples that were, kind of losing interest in each other. If you want to stay together, introduce novelty in the bedroom. You have vacation sex, try spanking or bondage or try, anal or whatever it is, okay? That was always, well, then you know what happens? That becomes old too. That becomes boring too, because you've done it, because you're on this dopamine track where anything that's after a while becomes boring.
Right.
On this oxytocin track, you don't want novelty. You want your partner for an hour, twice a day, as often as you can. So you could have sex twice a day and be just thrilled.
Right.
And just both of you at any age. And that's the joy of this.
Right.
And that's built into all of our brains, this ability to have this amazing love for our partner where we don't want anyone else and we just see that person as the most amazing person in the world from now until the day that we leave this earth. That's amazing, really, isn't it? So that we have this ability.
It is. So that was the other point that I was going to make is the point of people introducing things in the bedroom, right? It gets old over time, just like you stated. So toys are readily available everywhere, right? Toys for him, hers, ours, in between, right? So what is your thought and take on that? You touched on it a little bit. It gets old over time. So what is your general thought on either party using toys individually or using toys together?
One of the worst things that can be brought into the bedroom are things that reduce our sensitivity. And that involves vaginal and clitoral sensitivity for women and penile sensitivity for men. And a lot of times women have been using vibrators. And there's nothing wrong per se with a vibrator. I mean, that would probably be the most typical toy that is used in the bedroom. But unfortunately, it's very desensitizing for women because, obviously they get used to a vibrator, they get used to it, and it reduces their feelings of sensation and pleasure when they're with a man sexually. So I think vibrators can be a real issue. I feel that they're a problem, and I don't recommend those types of toys at all because of their desensitizing nature. And, otherwise, there's all kinds of things, mostly fetishes. And because of the internet these days, there's all these communities where before, it was very seedy, and maybe there'd be a neighborhood where there'd be a sex store, that only kind of, weird people would go to.
Yeah.
But now it's everywhere. There's communities for everything.
Yes.
You're into feet, there's a community for that. You're into whips, there's a community for that. There's all these communities, and way more extreme. I mean, they're so extreme. And they reinforce each other. People's sense of community and social media kind of reinforces what somebody may think. And I found this was a problem when I started working with the men back in 2012, because some of the men were saying, I think I'm gay. I'd say, well, why do you think that? And they'd say, well, I really like gay porn, and I have a lot of gay fantasies. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with being gay, and certainly people can be gay and be straight. There's nothing wrong with any of it. But I said, why don't you stop porn and see what happens?
Yeah.
And a lot of times they would stop it, and then they would find out they weren't attracted to men at all, that it was a result of the porn use. So toys in the bedroom is the same way, that a lot of toys are brought in for the novelty aspect because people are bored and they've seen it in porn, and they have communities around a lot of these fetishes.
Right.
And if they kind of go on a diet and just get that out of their lives for a while, then normal, quote, normal sex becomes super interesting again, and they don't really care about novelty or toys anymore.
Right. And talking about communities, the lifestyle people, right? The lifestyle couple, I should say, that is something that has, grown a lot. Talking of communities, you have couples that, are having a lifestyle where monogamy is not an expectation of that relationship, right? There's openness with, dating several people. There's also openness of bringing people into the intimacy, right? So there are people that have practiced this long term, long term being, years. It doesn't come without its own drama in a sense. So what is your take on that for couples who are in the lifestyle of being open to inviting others into their intimacy, being open to, having additional partners?
Yeah. Well, I found that when we got into nirvana sex, and a lot of men have discovered it independently, and I learned it from some men and women who were doing it already. I mean, I didn't invent anything. I'm not that smart. Some of them did have multiple partners. Well, and they had multiple partners, and they were very happy, and it wasn't a big deal. But I did find that the desire for multiple partners, as they pursued more nirvana sex, faded away, and they became just interested in one person normally. Maybe occasionally there may be someone else that they would bring in, but they weren't that interested in that type of polygamous lifestyle anymore.
Okay.
And some of the people had been in it very heavily because, they were people that are sort of focused on sex and trying different experiments and things. And they sort of gravitated to nirvana sex. And when they did, the oxytocin builds up in the brain, and you start becoming more focused on your partner, and you don't necessarily care about other people as much anymore. And I found that the desire for that tended to diminish. There's nothing wrong with it, and some people still practice it sometimes, but it becomes a lot less important. It's more like, salt and pepper on a meal that's already really good.
Salt and pepper on a meal that's really good. I like that. I really like that. So in the context of everything that we're talking about, is there a much better, because the thing that humans sometimes do is justify our actions, habits, at least it's not that, at least it's better than this, right? So when we talk about pornography, right, pornography exists in all forms. It is visual, it is auditory, it is also in written form, even with audiobooks, okay?
Right.
The one time, the book that took the world by storm, especially among the demographic of women, was 50 Shades of Grey, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, really.
And it was a series. So
yeah, and movies and everything, all kinds of things. Yeah.
So does it matter what form a person consumes this media, in a sense, or this level of, what should I call it? Get involved in the consumption of this material, I should say, right?
Yes.
Does it matter what medium? Is one better than the other? Or does it all have the same effect?
No, it's a great question. Yeah. So I studied this, and what I found out is that there's some men that won't really give up porn very easily. And what I found is that the most damaging type can be gotten rid of pretty easily if there's a substitute for it. And the written word is much better than videos in terms of the damage that it can do to somebody. I think that if a man or woman still wants to use porn, if they use erotica, they're way better off, way better off, because there's not the idealized body images. There's not the same type of escalation to more and more extreme forms of porn. You're not watching people have sex. It's in your imagination because it's written down. It has to be in your imagination, the picture. And so I think that my findings are that it's far, far better to use erotica as porn instead of videos or even photographs. I think it makes an enormous difference.
How is that?
Because you're reading and then you're putting the pictures together in your own head.
So there's work involved in it as opposed to it being spoon-fed.
And they're your pictures. They're your personal pictures. They're not someone else's. So it's not the voyeurism where you're watching people have sex. That's the difference. It's far less damaging. So I always recommend that if people want to use porn, that they substitute erotica for videos and photographs. And I think videos are far more destructive. So right around the year 2000, we saw the rise of what they call tube sites or video pornography, because before that, it wasn't the bandwidth and the technology wasn't very good. And at that point is when we started seeing an enormous problem with men having erection problems, having problems getting hooked on porn. There were always some men that were hooked on it before, but this made it very easy to go bam, 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 novelty, 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 new scene, new scene, new scene, where someone would get 30 or 40 tabs on their phone or their browser, and they would have, go from one scene to the next, the next, the next. That's terribly destructive to our brain's reward circuit, whereas erotica doesn't have that problem. So it's far, far, far better.
So how about, talking about erotica and, books, right? Does it matter if a person is reading it or listening to it? So I'm talking in terms of audiobooks, right? I'm talking about the obsession of it, right? Consuming a book or a series, sporadically is different from, say, I'm heading to work and I have a pair of, headphones, earphones on. I'm listening to erotica on my way to work. I'm listening to erotica in between my meetings, on my break time, on my way back from work. And if I am doing any chore around the house, I'm listening to that, right? I'm riding in a car to the grocery store or to pick up something from the pharmacy, continuing that book. So the overconsumption of it, granted, even if it's just erotica, right?
It's an addictive process, what you're talking about. And that's very common. It's much less likely if you're reading than if you're listening. Much more addictive if you're listening because it's being fed to you. And it would be harder to drive to work reading porn than listening. And so it's less likely to be as addictive and as affect your rest of your life if it's just written rather than audio. There's also audios that are hypnotic that men are getting off on, where women have basically sort of like OnlyFans or Patreon accounts where they do these hypnotic scenes for men, and those are very harmful as well for men, really. So I think you're absolutely right, and the perception that audio can be more damaging than reading is very much true.
Absolutely. So audio-visual, right? Talking about, OnlyFans and similar medias or artists. They're all artists at this point, artistry, right? So there's also the addiction that is, widespread now of live cams, right? Live cams where
live cams.
People are finding masturbation partners, but not only that aspect. There is also a rise of people being extorted, right? By being threatened to either send money or they'll be exposed or their privacy will be exposed. So I'm thinking in the aspect of not only ruining the sex life between a partner and a person potentially, or somebody's personal sex life, but also a reputation. Is there something that you're seeing along the clients that, work with you about possible reputation being tarnished or damaged because of maybe getting involved with things that are not conducive for their well-being.
Yeah, that's a great point. So I haven't seen as much of that sort of blackmail, but I may not ever know about it if it happens because they may not tell me, but I do see a lot of this. I see a lot of men that basically a relationship is transactional.
Right.
If it's an OnlyFans or a cam woman and it's a transaction, it's a business transaction. But sometimes women will manipulate men and it'll move into where, oh, I'm really in love with you. And then they start sort of, I don't know if the woman's lying, but I'm pretty sure they are. And a lot of men get hooked into this and then they start sending a lot more money. And that's a very, very common thing. And especially I'm told that they used to call them boiler rooms with telemarketers in them, making calls. They probably still have them. But these are like women and people that are in Asia that are posing as, a single young woman who might be in love with somebody. And then these older men start, sort of falling for them. And there's some cam stuff involved, but it's like, oh, I really like you. And then they start sending them money. And this is a major thing. And a lot of it is actually organized. It's actually organized, sort of criminal syndicates that are doing this. And the men, they have a fantasy and it's so valuable to have that fantasy that they don't want to really know too much to, destroy the fantasy. Sometimes even when it's exposed for what it is, the men get upset and they wanted it to continue. They want to pretend that the woman is in love with them because that fantasy is kind of keeping them going. I see that a lot, especially with older men, a lot.
So what is the remedy in a sentence? For an older man, because I can understand the loneliness aspect of, maybe being older, you're retired or divorced or a widower, right?
Right.
What is it that we as a society or loved ones or friends can do to support, in our lives so they don't fall prey to, scams and extortion of that
basically.
nature? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I could just say, for example, if the son or the daughter, they go, Dad is like in love with this Chinese woman and there's something going on here. They're a little concerned about Dad being taken to the cleaners and their inheritance sort of going down the tubes. That's just how it is sometimes. But I hear this a lot from men that I'm coaching. I never tell them to look more carefully I don't question them on this. Like, if they want this belief that there's this girl in China or Vietnam that's in love with them and eventually they're going to get together, if that helps them get through the day, I don't see that's okay. Everybody has to cope. Like you said, as you're older, a lot of people by themselves are very lonely.
Right.
What is the solution to loneliness? In our culture, we don't have anybody. And some of the people that work for me that live in other countries, they're always with their kids. They all live in one home, right? And, that's normal. You get married, the wife moves in with, become their husband, and then her parents are there. It's not always wonderful. A lot of it's really bad, but nobody's by themselves. And here in the West, we have men and women just by themselves. Mm-hmm. And men, they have a sex drive that continues typically till they die. So it doesn't just end. A lot of times women's sex drive tends to be very subdued after menopause, but men tend to have a sex drive, assuming they're not on a lot of different drugs and medications, but they have the desire to have sex anyway. They all do, no matter what age they are. And they're lonely and they want to have sex. So it's natural that someone is going to prey on them this way. I don't know the answer to that, really. I don't really know. I just don't. I know that it's wrong of me to disrupt someone's fantasy about in their life, and I would never do that. So I never do. And I feel like probably the man's son or daughter aren't going to be too thrilled, but what can you do? It's his money.
It's his money, yeah, but there's also need for expenses and to take care of yourself.
Oh yeah.
So I think I can't speak to it, to be honest with you. That is one of the things that actually stunned me. When you talk about culture shock, that was one of my culture shocks. When I came to America as a young girl, that there were homes dedicated to older folks.
Yeah.
Right? Growing up, the grandmothers and grandpas were all in the family. Like,
Yeah.
I grew up with my grandmother, my paternal grandmother, living with us until she died, and she was
Right.
everybody's responsibility, right?
Right.
And when
Right.
she was functional, and my siblings enjoyed her involvement. However, I didn't get to. But growing up, making sure she ate, making sure she was taken care of, and all of that stuff. So
Right.
um, I ask these questions because I'm naturally curious as well. What can be done, right? So, is
Right.
there a community in Florida? You're in Florida, so you have your loofah villages, so which is great. Is
Right.
there is there
Yeah. The
need
villages.
to,
If you have money, it's pretty nice, is what I hear. Yeah.
is
It's true. That's
there
true. Yeah, I had a guy. Okay, I had a guy that told me the story about his uncle. It
right,
wasn't him, but it was his uncle. His uncle was like got into his late 90s and was alone. And he there was this really nice home, like you said, an old age home, as we called it. I don't know what the right name is, but
right?
and he joined it, and then he started having sex with all these ladies in their 90s, and he just had a great time, and he died at like 106, a happy man. So, and they were happy too. How many men were there? None. So, women tend to outlive men, and
I mean, with everything that we go through, but and just for remedy sake, because loneliness is very
Mhm.
bad.
It's
Loneliness
the
can
worst.
make you fall prey to a lot of
Yeah,
very dangerous things, right?
it's the worst.
So
Yeah,
if it's consensual, and
yeah,
people just want to live out the rest of their days. I can't say
yeah.
years, because again, we're talking about 90 something year olds and 100-year olds. If people are willing to live out the rest of their days happy, it's consensual. Why not create an
Yeah.
environment that they can have that safely, right? Without being extorted.
Well, I agree with you
Yeah,
there. I would have homes set up for men where younger women would come in and help service their sexual needs, and I think that would be great. And have a relationship with them where they play games and do things. I think that would be great. I don't know; it's just not sanctioned in our world yet,
it is not.
but hopefully it will be. I think it's a great idea, and women, this similar thing. But I think especially for men, the reason is because men are more solitary than women, and a lot of women have a social network and they have friends. Their friends generally will die off as they get old, and if you have a woman, my stepmother is in her 90s, and all of her friends practically they've all passed, but she had a lot of
Yeah.
friends. My dad hardly never had a friend, and that's very common for men. They don't have friends, so now they get older, they don't have anybody, they're alone. And there are great solutions to this issue, and somebody should solve it. I agree
Somebody
with you.
should. Whoever's
Yeah,
listening, hello. We need a solution. Let's
yeah,
help
you're right.
people out.
Right here in Florida, we can try it right here.
You're in the prime location.
Yeah.
You have the demographics for it. So I think like the younger generation of men, with the bro mindset, maybe that could change, as the generations pass, because more and more men in the younger generation I'm seeing are forming more very close knit relationship where they're hanging out together, they're taking vacations together
Mhm.
without their girlfriends, significant others, or anybody. So, is that something that you think all men have when they're younger, and when they get older, they just get,
I
into
think,
their silos?
first of all, what you're saying is so key. Like, men should be working on having friends and doing things with their friends, whether it's hunting, fishing, whatever it is. And I think that's why men a lot of times are doing video games, because they have headphones on and they're talking to
Right.
other men while they're playing the game, and that's a big part of it, really. But I unfortunately think that after college, people generally don't make new friends,
Mm.
and women do more than men, but men don't. And their friends fade away, and they don't maintain the friendships. A lot of men don't even maintain their relationships with their adult children, really, if they're by themselves. They just let it all go. And it's really awful that so many men have just given up on having friends and maintaining friendships. And I can tell you from my own experience, I'm in my mid 60s, and I have a few very close friends, but it is very difficult for me to find friends because most men don't want to have a friend. I don't really understand it exactly, but they just don't. And so traditionally, if you look at thousands of years, how do men bond? They bond on activities they do together, right? Women bond more like socially, around shelling the peas or, whatever it is, men bond by going hunting together, fishing, things like that, bowling, whatever it is. So I always try to recommend that men get involved in some activity like that and that they develop some friendships that way. Did you ever see that movie, The Big Lebowski? Big Lebowski? It's a funny movie, but in it, there's a
It
big
is.
bowling motif, the Buscemi and anyway, it's like you can see the friendships that men have, and it's very true to life because they go bowling together and they're friends through bowling. So men have to get into activities where they're going to meet other men and be able to do things that they enjoy doing. And I think that keeps them from being as lonely. And I think that's a really, really, really key thing. And most men don't pay enough attention to that. And then they're by themselves and they could do something about it if they just thought about it and started to work finding those activities.
Yeah. It's also very cultural too, because,
Is it?
yeah, it is. As you're talking and I just reflecting on my culture, and men are very communal in a sense where there's always a reason for men to meet, to discuss issues or hang out. Or I see that more on like the African side of things. And even among like clubs, when in America, among the African American subset of subgroup or cultural group, I should say, when you talk about the making friends after college, there are those sorority groups where the men make it a priority to get together.
Yeah.
They make it a priority to, make an impact, and they make it a priority just to hang, just us guys kind of a thing. The Western culture, however, I do see that loneliness that you talk about, where people are in, retirement homes and, you don't see a family in sight and they're just grumpy sometimes. So,
Oh my God. Everyone in those places, you know what it is? They say, my kids left me here. They're going to come and pick me up. It's like they don't view it as home. They're like hanging out, waiting to be picked up to take to the real home. It's
yeah,
awful.
yeah.
But I suspect that we have something that is taking the place of that I would say social media. Wouldn't you think?
Yeah,
it's not a good substitute.
Yeah, social media is big. It is destructive.
Yeah.
I had a talk with somebody yesterday, and he's a school teacher who developed this program. He's based in the UK. And the main reason why he did it is that, electronics and, the addiction to social media has not only kept kids indoors, out of nature, the way they're supposed to be and explore. There's this comparing each themselves to others. There's this depression and anxiety that comes with that, right?
Yeah,
and there's all this bullying and all these bad behaviors,
bragging.
So
that's awful.
Yeah, so he's like, in his opinion, he doesn't think children should have access to social media
I
until
agree.
at least high school.
Exactly. Even then, it's probably worse in high school.
Absolutely. So he said, even with having a phone on them for, phone calls, contacting emergency, whatever, however, the text messages, people still find each other in all the social group messaging systems, still using it as a method to bully or share inappropriate videos or whatever. So to that, social media has a lot because, again, social media has succeeded in feeding our dopamine, right? That's instant gratification, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah. Funny video. Oh, I saw that yesterday.
Right.
Oh, what other bird funny video can I watch? What other dog funny video do I watch? I see this with my older child. She loves to laugh. She loves comedy, right? So it's always a repetition of something, right? So that dopamine, that instant gratification has us hooked, right?
That's
to
right.
The point that
it does.
We no longer value interaction with a human being.
Oh, it's so slow. Oh, people are so boring. So if you're together, you got to be on your phone. At least it's tolerable, We're slow and I'm sort of joking, but I'm totally serious.
I get
It
it.
is true.
No,
It
it
is
is
true.
true. It is true. We lack that patience to let something meaningful grow.
Our brain is rewired. That's why, like I said, our brain is wired towards social media now. And so interactions with people in the flesh and blood world are IRL, as they say, in real life. They're so slow and boring. That's why, you know how of a certain age, you can't get a person on the phone. They won't talk. They won't call anybody. They won't talk to anybody. You know, a millennial, we call the zillennials, Gen Z, and the millennials, they'll never talk to someone on the phone. Now, I don't know about you because you grew up in a different culture, but when I was little, everybody loved talking on the phone. And the big thing was when you got your own phone, you know, as a teenager. And this was a wired phone. It was not a cell phone. So it was like, now that you can't get them on the phone. So everything, that's too slow and too boring. But I do want to make a differentiation between something. I think there's a difference between social media where you're bragging, comparing, I'll like you if you like me or whatever, okay, and chat, something like being able to see someone have a call with somebody or just a text chat, someone that you like that you can't get together with very often, and you kind of keep these chats going and you share your life. And I do that with my adult children. I do talk to them on the phone, but every day we're, you know, exchanging like, what are you doing today? And what did you make for dinner and all that sort of thing. We're not doing it on social media.
Right.
We're doing it on Signal.
Right.
I think that's a nice use of technology.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It keeps that conversation and communication going. You know, yes, again, I feel like growing up in a different country gave me the satisfaction and the nostalgia of appreciating, you know, landlines as opposed to, you know,
Yes.
the cell phones all the time.
Yes.
You know, I even grew up using like a rotary phone.
So you'll talk to people on the phone, right? You talk to
Right.
people.
Well, I do
I mean,
talk
it may
to
be a
people on the phone.
FaceTime,
However,
but
I'm not a Gen Z. However, I am a millennial. Okay, I'm old enough to remember the corded phones, but
yeah.
I'm also young enough to. I don't appreciate impromptu visits. However, if you call me and I really want to talk to you at the time, I will pick up my phone. However, if
Yeah.
I'm in the middle of something, I will
I
call you
know.
back. I will reach out to you. I won't ignore you and text you. Do you want to text instead? Unless I really don't want to talk to you, and you would know that.
You know what's something about that, if you don't mind my commenting on your comment, now we're sort of expected, like someone says, I sent you a text, you know, you didn't answer. And I go, yeah, I don't look at my text during the day. You know, I really, I run 3 businesses and I have a family and it's very precious to me. I'm not going to worry. I turn off all the alerts. I don't want to know. And like you said, if someone call, in the old days, they'd call you on the phone, it'd be ringing in the middle of something. I got to take a call.
Right.
Now there's no reason for that. You know, you text someone and saying, can we talk later on? You know, and then you schedule, you know, I think that's good too.
I think that's good. I would go for that. Let me know what time and day, and I'll make time for you, I promise. In the middle, like I'm talking to you right now. Everything is silence, right? When I'm done, I will look at it, right? If it was an emergency and I listen, like if it's important enough, leave me a message, right? So
shut off all your alerts. Stop being interrupted all the time. It's awful to live that way. Oh my God.
It is like anxiety provoking. And you know, and the thing, going back to alerts and what we're talking about, human connection and sex, is that the dating culture in our modern society, you know, having some single friends and having to understand what is out there, it's quite scary, I think, for both the men and the women.
That's right.
To want to self-please or self-satisfied as opposed to risk either being taken advantage of or being assaulted, right? Because people do get, on the men's side of things, the reports from women that men do get aggressive and cannot.
Men are scary sometimes. Men are scary sometimes.
They can't take no for an answer, right?
Yeah, and they're big and they're powerful and they're strong. I mean, that's the way, you know, it's true. I know in the old days, there's a lot of wisdom that our mothers would have told their daughters, you know, don't, you know, get to know someone before you go out by yourselves, double date, do this, meet at a coffee, you know, all those things are still really good. They're still really good. I think the danger, I think it could be managed very easily.
Okay.
And I think it's vastly overstated. And it discourages people from meeting other people,
Right.
thinking that it's dangerous. It's another excuse to be by ourselves on social media and porn. I'm not saying it doesn't happen.
Right.
Of course it does. And I have a daughter, and I want her to be cautious, but mostly it's a story we tell ourselves that gives us a reason not to do the difficult work of getting out in the real world and meeting people, because it's very difficult.
So basically do
Right.
it safely, because some men can be dangerous.
You should do it safely. Yes.
Absolutely. So
Not difficult. Not difficult at all to manage that risk,
Okay.
though, really.
So
Yeah.
meet in a general area, and possibly have a chaperone nearby.
Yeah, just meet in a public place for a
Right.
few times and get to know somebody. And there's exactly. And of course, people are roofied. You have to be careful. Of course you do.
Yes.
But because of one little story gets out as magnified, and it's not as dangerous a world as people think it is.
I
They're-
think some people do get scared. I think
Yes.
when that story gets out, is usually
Yes.
of a woman who is fearless, or who's had enough, or
Mhm.
who is bold enough to stand up, because a lot of women do, keep quiet on, crimes that happen.
Oh yeah.
And on
Oh,
the
yeah,
other side,
definitely.
men too. Men do experience sexual assault. Men do also experience being taken advantage of.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's different for men, but it's very much the same. Like when I was a boy, I definitely had men coming on to me. And I had friends that had men come on to me, and they had sex in the bathroom, and they were like 13 or 14. It's very common. And it's just nothing to talk about, because it's very shameful as a man.
Yeah.
And, you just like, I'm not going to tell anybody about that. It's probably the similar thing for women, but it's not like none of that happens. It does, but it could be managed very, very well. And it shouldn't be used as an excuse to stay home, right? It shouldn't be used as an excuse to just stay in your own little world. Same thing about children. I walked to school as a kid. Friends walked to school. We walked 10 blocks to school. Nowadays, there's this perception that if your kid is outside on the front lawn, they're going to be seized by a stranger, which is very, very, very rare. But people vastly overestimate
It happens.
certain dangers.
It happens, Matt.
It does
The
happen, but it's
fear,
rare.
I think the difference is, this is the good part of social media, right?
Mhm.
The difference is that when these things happen, we are all made aware of, right?
Right,
So back
right.
in the, say, 80s, I'm not going to
Yeah.
say 90s,
Yeah.
because things started changing in the 90s, right?
Yeah.
Back in the 80s, 70s, and 60s, there was no social media. We didn't have every phone did not have a camera, all right?
It was on the newspaper. If you knew about it, it had to be in the newspaper.
All
Yeah.
right. Everything was in the
Yeah.
newspaper. There was no Amber Alert, right?
It was never in the newspaper. These things were just hidden away.
Okay.
The boy next door, he's abusing these kids, but nobody. I mean, exactly.
Right.
I know it was very common.
It's common now, and I think all
Still
of us
is.
are hyper aware, because when
Yeah.
these things do happen, it's like, front page on every social media platform,
Yeah.
on multiple creators' accounts.
Right.
And
Right.
it is good to be informed. It
Yes.
breeds a certain level of anxiety too.
You should be cautious.
Right.
You should be cautious. You should use your information to be careful and take some precautions. But I also think that our brains vastly overestimate these kind of statistical odds. If we're taking the proper precautions, we don't have that much to worry about most of the time. I
So,
would say.
ladies and gentlemen, take precautions. And if you are hurt or assaulted in
Yeah.
any sense, do the work in healing. Talk to somebody, talk to a therapist, heal, so that you can become healthy and you don't engage in this self-destructive behavior of really, with pornography and whatever else media is out there that actually hinders you from having a fulfilling relationship with a human being.
And I think when you have children, I mean, I think you can sort of, you teach your children, when I was growing up, don't take candy from strangers.
Right.
Don't get into a strange car with someone you don't know, blah, blah. And all that's useful. You repeat it enough times. Just like, when you have a date with a guy, do it in a public place the first or the second time.
Right.
Let your girlfriend know where you are. All these kinds of things are very good. But then once you've taken those precautions, I think it's largely a fairly safe world if you've taken those precautions, and we shouldn't use them as excuses to avoid the real world and the real contact. It's just so easy to do because with social media and porn, we don't really have the same drive to get out there as we used to because our needs are sort of greatly satisfied sitting on our phones. And if you give someone this excuse of, "Oh, it's dangerous, you could get a disease, okay, I'll just stay home." Because we already want to. Remember COVID?
It's safer.
Perfect.
It's safer, Matt. I'll just stay home. No disease.
Yeah, remember that? And then people stayed home and they like staying home because it's not challenging. It's simpler.
It is.
It's much easier.
It is. It is.
And a lot of them never, especially the younger people, anywhere 18, 20, that was the period when they should have developed the social skills and been getting out, and they didn't. And a lot of them feel like they got really screwed over, and they're probably right.
I think the pandemic did a number in that.
Yes,
When the
you're
lockdown
right.
happened, there was no human interaction except
Yes.
the screen, right? We all
Yes.
worked from a screen. We all interacted through screen. And what else was there to do in between
Right.
meetings and in between everything else?
Yeah.
I think that NoFap really came after the pandemic because there was an increase,
Mhm.
masturbation that was happening, right?
Mhm.
So the pandemic did a number on maturing young adults at the time, right? And
Exactly, right, in the formative years.
Yes, a lot of people are unlearning a lot of those isolation skills that we had to learn to be safe around that time, right? And something else that I just want to add, when you're going for the young men and women out there, so that you're not taken advantage of, have your drink spiked or assaulted.
Yes.
When you're going out on a date, please stay in a public place. And
Yes.
if you so happen to have maybe a date in an intimate setting, say a hotel room, an Airbnb, or the person's home, apartment, whatever, not only is it important for you to tell a girlfriend, a sister, if you have that relationship, a brother, a parent, right, where you're going,
Right.
but also
Right.
have this person understand that, hey, I'm coming to your apartment. Guess what? 5 people know I'm coming here and I'm meeting you. All right. So if there's anything that they're planning, they understand that, hey, this young lady will have people, or this young man will have people looking for them if I do anything. Let them know, hey, they know your name, they know what address I was coming to. Remember that picture of you from dating profile, they have it too. So do everything to put a lot of safeguards for your own protection, put a lot of safeguards, and let people know that, hey, if anything happened, I have people coming to look for me. And make sure, even if it's a one person or 2 people, right? There's got to be at least one person in your life, right?
That's
even
right.
if it's the janitor at your job, right? Let them know that, hey, I'm going on a date to this person's apartment. This is where it's located. This is your full name and whatever. And also let your potential date know that, mind you, yes, we're all set for Saturday. Somebody knows that I'm coming to you.
Right. And look, congratulations for dating, because it's gone out of style.
Now, man, it's so scary. I've heard stories. I'm like, oh my goodness, you guys are like my superheroes. It's a lot.
I don't know. It's what I really dislike are the red pill guys that are telling men that they should just be giving up. These are mostly like kind of men who are relationship losers. I don't want to say they're losers in real life, but in relationships, they've had problems. And they just tell men again and again, whether it's on Reddit or YouTube or TikTok, give up, don't do it. Women just want your money. They just want to take advantage of you, don't bother. And then it's easier to listen to them and not try, because trying risks a lot of rejection. So I think that's a huge problem for men, listening to those people. Get them out of your life. Don't listen to those people. Really. They're just poison.
I mean, we have the red pill for men, and then we have I think it's 4B movement. Is it 4B or 2B movement?
What is it for women?
I think it's 4B movement. I think that's what it's called. It started in...
Okay.
I think it started in Japan, either Japan or Korea. And those countries have now reported low birth because women are refusing to, be baby factories, right? Women are demanding to be treated well, so they're now focused on career and just being rock stars, right? So it is resulting in less and less babies being born. And so the men have theirs, the women have theirs, and society's in a bad place.
I find that I visited Japan and I studied people and met with a lot of people in Japan. I've done a lot of traveling around the world and study research. And it's normal to see women that are living with their parents, or maybe they're on their own, but they don't have a partner. The women don't have a partner. The men don't have a partner. Nobody's dating. No one's meeting anybody, basically. I don't think they ever had a dating culture there. They had a arranged marriage
Yes.
culture, and that sort of fell by the wayside. So there's nothing left. And if you want to see where we're going here in the US or in the Western world, just look at Japan, because they're only like 5 years ahead of us in that regard. And it's pretty eye-opening, really. It's shocking. And I think we can get ourselves out of this morass. I think we can. That's why I do these podcasts.
Yeah.
I try to get the word out. People do not realize how amazing a romantic sexual relationship can be, how incredible that can be. They just don't. They just don't. And I think part of it is we look at our parents and their relationship, as an example. We go, well, mom and dad never really got along. And, I don't want that for myself. And there's all kinds of excuses not to look for a romantic partner, right?
Right.
Lots of excuses. But I just think it can be so fantastic. You have no idea how wonderful it can be.
It can. I think we all have to heal collectively. There's so much in society that is not supporting people being at ease to experience that nirvana of a relationship. There's so many variables, including pornography addiction. So collectively, I think when we all heal and come from a place of empathy and understanding the damage that we're causing ourselves and the people in our intimate relationships, I think we can move forward in understanding where we don't want to go. Unfortunately, the world is going where we shouldn't be going, especially here in the United States. So I don't know how that's going to work out, though.
Oh, it's worse in other places, but we saw. But I would say, if I were to give, I don't want to say advice, but a suggestion, I think men that I work with, young men or men that are dating, have
many marriages. Don't leave them out. Don't leave those men out. The men.
So men in marriages, So men in marriages, like what ends up happening is they get involved with the day-to-day, and sex becomes boring, and this stops. And before you know it, it's been 3 months. That's going to doom a relationship. I think you need to have like daily cuddling and sex several times a week. And I really recommend that you schedule it. I know people say, that's not spontaneous, Matt. That's really not.
You're not
but
15,
you know what?
You're
It's
not
not
20 anymore.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be. Exactly. And the best sex is in the morning for most people, because you're not on a full stomach.
Mm-hmm.
You haven't gotten started with your day. So get up a little bit earlier, schedule it, and a lot of cuddling and everything. You know what? Looking into each other's eyes for a minute or two, that is a fantastic way of building oxytocin and deepening a relationship. It's so difficult to do it. We're so used to not having eye contact more than a second or two. Stare into your romantic partner's eyes for a minute. Just try that. Just see how world-changing that really is. Something like eye gazing really, really changes things.
Beautiful. I like it. So for everybody who's listening, I learned a few things. I know you did too, if you were paying attention.
Me too. I learned a lot.
Oh goodness, man, you stop in a second. So I like the way that you put everything in a way that we all can relate to, we all can understand. It is not a scary thing to talk about sex, people. It is the essence of our being, but we've made it very unhealthy in inviting other things in. So we can get it healthy again, right? Your desires are not evil. Your desires are not anything to be ashamed of. However, you utilizing it in a way that is healthy for you, is healthy for your relationship, is healthy for the future that you want is very important. So that is.
Well, one final word I'd say about nirvana sex for me is I feel like it's nothing I had to tell my children. They can observe how loving their parents are. And I feel that that's a great example that I'm setting for my children, and probably the best thing that I've ever done in this world. So.
Oh gosh, Matt, that was beautiful. Because again, when you're satisfied, your wife is satisfied, when life is satisfactory, that is the example. And the one thing about children is that children will very much not listen to a word you say, but they will pay attention to every single action. Right?
What you do.
every single action you take, what you do, how
Yeah.
you react,
Yeah.
how you deal with things, how you interact with people, is very evident. Yeah, that's being a family
Yeah.
person for you.
So some inspiration for somebody is one of your listeners, because it's a hard thing to get. You do this, your life will be so much better, and you will set a fantastic example for your children, which is, a wonderful thing.
You absolutely will. So get you don't think sex affects your life that much, but it does. So
Yes.
be in alignment with where you are right now with your sexual health. Work to make it better as much as you possibly can, and then go from there. You can't want help for somebody who doesn't. So if you have a partner who's addicted to pornography and is affecting your sex life and you've tried helping them, unfortunately, you can't help them until they feel like they need help. Okay, if they don't feel
True.
like they have a problem, there's nothing you can do.
Correct. Yes. Yes.
In that case, Matt, what would you recommend for anybody who's listening, a wife or husband whose partner has addiction to pornography and is heavily affecting the sex life, and they've gone months without sex, and even when they try, the erection is not sustained, or there's no vaginal secretions because the person is
Right.
addicted to fantasy. What would you offer as recommendation for a partner who's
Yes.
stuck in
Yeah.
a cycle
Well,
like
that's a great question. So what I suggest is that it's very similar to what you would do if you found out your partner was having an affair. You get them to tell you what they're doing, everything they're doing, and then you make steps where they commit to using apps like Freedom, which put parental controls on your router, parental controls on his or her phone. They have to live their life where it's very, very difficult for them to consume porn. They have to agree to that. Otherwise, the relationship is really doomed.
that?
I think it's very similar to, and serious, really. It's not that using porn is the same as having an affair, but for someone getting addicted to it, as you described, which is quite common, that is very, very fatal to a relationship, and it has to be considered as seriously as an affair. And that means very, very strict controls and everything. Fortunately, you could call your cable company, or you go online and you can turn on parental controls. You can put parental controls on his or her phone, and it's really makes it much easier to be compliant. Much easier, because even if you're tempted, it's pretty difficult. Just like if you're trying to go on a diet and avoid desserts, don't buy desserts. You can't go to the kitchen and just eat cookies because they're not there. You might be able to drive to the store and get them, but it's a little harder. So you make your partner agree to that. That's really the only thing I found that works.
At what point do you walk away if somebody finds walkarounds? Because we have to be honest, this is an addiction.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
any addict who always, despite what is being put in place for them to break the
Right.
addiction, every addict will find a way for walk around to
Yes.
get their fix. So
Yes.
at what point can a person just say, you know what, maybe you don't want to break this, and it's
Okay.
affecting me as a person, my self-esteem, whatever. Maybe it's time for me to just let you focus on what you need to focus for yourself.
So I'll assume for this example, we're talking about the man that is having the problem with porn, but I will say it could be the woman as
Right.
well. But for a woman, I would say that women really have to be very, very observant about when their man starts to decline having sex. You never, ever wait on that or think that that's just a temporary situation. Now, men will blame their pressures at work.
Mhm.
They'll blame the fact that they're tired or they're taking a certain medication. And this may be true. For example, medications for blood pressure like lisinopril, SSRI drugs can cause, there's some that can cause a loss of libido or erection problems, but they can always go to their doctor and get a different medication that doesn't cause erection problems.
Yes.
But when men start declining sex to say, no, I don't want to do it tonight, that's a huge red flag. I don't think that you should just wait it out, because you've got a situation where either your partner is having an affair or using porn, is addicted to porn.
Right.
Very, very likely. And if it's a medical issue, then it's good to talk about it. You can go to the doctor and see about different medications.
Right.
There's nothing embarrassing about going to your doctor.
Right.
I mean, you may feel embarrassed, but you talk to your doctor about it. I need a different medication. My wife said we can't have sex now because I don't have an erection. But women are a lot of times way too patient on this subject. Instead of doing something about it, they just let it go, and then it's too late.
What is too late?
Well, if a relationship goes 2 or 3 months without having sex, it's got to be resuscitated. It's sort of like dragging someone out of the swimming pool. And you got to give mouth to mouth resuscitation. You got to do something. I would say 2 or 3 months of no sex is the limit of what where it starts to become quite serious, endangering the relationship. And you've got to get to the heart of it, and preferably way before then.
So how about a year to two? Because people
I
do
have people I
report,
know that are in 10 or 20 years,
right,
but yeah, I mean, they're dead bedrooms. Go to Reddit, dead bedrooms. There's a whole subreddit around it. A lot of marriages end up that way. If you want to live that way, that's okay. That's your right, and you could be happy if that's your decision. I'm not here to say that you're making the wrong decision. For me, it would be the wrong decision. I can't imagine living that way, but it's okay. People want to live that way. A lot of them do, but you don't have to
right,
typically.
right,
I find that a lot of times women get issues from menopause, like vaginal dryness, painful intercourse. They're not really interested anymore. But Nirvana sex brings it all back. And plus, there's some really nice, very low toxin lubes that you can use.
right,
They're absolutely very nice. There's absolutely no problem with that. I mean, a woman can get certain conditions that they may have medically.
right.
They may be getting chemotherapy, or they may be on drugs like aromatase inhibitors that dry their vagina and cause vaginal atrophy. But even so, if Nirvana sex is very, very easy and very kind to women, very easy even for women that are having health issues, so they can get sort of newly interested. If not the sex itself, the closeness to their partner and the person that they love is wonderful for women, even if it's not the greatest thing in the world like it used to be. They still like to have sex because of that closeness with their partner. So Nirvana sex is an answer to a lot of these. And I also find that if men are addicted to porn, they start Nirvana sex and they're very strict, working with their partner to avoid porn, avoid fantasy, to shut all that off. The sex starts becoming really, really great. And the addictive behavior and the addiction tends to fall by the wayside. I think it helps accelerate the wiring of the brain towards sex in real life again.
That's great to know because
Yeah.
a lot of people sometimes get stuck in not knowing what to do or
Yes.
questioning what is going on or questioning, again, like I said, affecting like self-esteem, like self-blaming as opposed
Very
to,
much so.
this is not a problem that I caused. However, this is a problem with my partner and my partner has to fix this. And if you're a man or woman out there, if you're using excuses like, oh, I'm stressed at work, this is
Right.
going on, this is going on, you are a very unfair person, especially to somebody who may not already recognize what is going on. You are being unfair to your partner. You are
Yes.
planting seeds that are going to not only affect your relationship, but this person, and this person has done nothing to deserve
Right.
that. If this is an
Right.
addiction, I think the shame is in you denying that is an addiction and you not, seeking help or wanting to get out of this thing that is not only destroying your relationship but somebody else. So again, you get the necessary support with addiction. It happens to a lot of people. However, you shouldn't be deliberately destroying somebody else. It's unfair.
Yeah. And if you talk to them about it and you say, I need your help, let's do this, and you have a plan,
Right.
and then you start the daily cuddling and everything, it becomes so much easier. And I don't think you'll miss it, really.
No.
It turns out that you won't miss it that much at all,
Yeah.
because the real life replaces it, and it becomes so wonderful that the brain easily rewires to it, and you can leave it behind. Now, you'll always have those neural pathways for porn that'll always be with you forever. We have trails in the forest that were created by animals or Native Americans that were done hundreds of years ago. There are still trails in the forest. They're still easier to go on those paths than any other. You always have those paths in your brain that are very friendly to porn. So you always have to watch it. So if you watch television, there's a movie, there's a show now, they show sex all the time, look away. You have to be very aware of triggers. There's so many triggers. The triggers can easily bring back sort of a feeling of being horny and then wanting porn and it being very difficult to control.
Right.
So what I try to do is I just look away, I limit it. If I'm reading a sex scene in a book, I just skip it because I know I'm always liable to that. It's always part of me and it's never going to go away. So I always have to be super careful.
I like the analogy of trails because
Yeah, exactly.
the way that our brains are wired, the neural pathways, they're wired to remember things.
They're
right?
never gone. They're always
Yeah.
there. They're never gone.
Yeah.
That's right.
You
That's right.
just have it's work, but you have to be willing to do the work. You have to be
Yeah.
willing to own up that is an issue. Yeah.
Vigilance. You have to be vigilant. Yeah, you have to
Be
protect
vigilant,
yourself
absolutely. Be vigilant.
from
And
triggers.
stop seeking out the shows that fit this addiction, because that's another thing that I see, right?
Yeah.
You know that you have this thing where pornography is life. However, the music you're listening to, the TV shows you watch, every single
Right.
show you watch points to that. The books you read, the books you
Yes.
listen to, the work that you do, or your leisure activities is surrounding pornography level of things. But we are all humans, we're all healing, we're all growing.
So a trigger creates a jolt of like horny sensation, a whole chemical cocktail. And if you expect it, it lasts about 35 minutes. If you get past that 35 minutes, you're okay. If you just have to realize that. So what I'd like to help people with is planning replacement behaviors. So if they do see a sex scene and they feel like masturbating to porn, they do something else instead that they've already planned out, like going down to a coffee place, or, there's different times when someone would be more susceptible to masturbating to porn, and they want to pick out behaviors instead of those things. And if they plan it in advance and stick to it, it's just like if you're trying to avoid eating desserts, when you're really hungry for dessert, you go and you have a piece of fruit, kind of like that. You decide what your replacement behavior is going to be.
And just smell it and walk out.
Well, I don't think I would be able to walk out. Too tempting.
Absolutely. Solitude is definitely a detriment. If you feel an urge, get out in the public. I don't think anybody's crazed enough or addicted enough to whip out their
I'm only 1 out of 100.
Wow.
Not most of the people don't.
You won't pull everything out in public and do whatever.
Yeah.
So being in a public place where you're around other people is a good way to, get over that, stimulation at the time.
Yeah.
So
it goes away quickly. I mean, the desire goes away. Again, when you have a trigger that activates your horniness and that cocktail of wanting, 35 minutes is really all it takes. And then if you do something else in the meantime, it's okay. You got through this.
Absolutely. I love it. So, Matt, we're going to include everything, Matt, in the show note.
Okay.
However you would like to reach out to him, this is not an easy topic to discuss. It's not an easy thing to cut to. However, it will help you. It will help you heal for a happier future. So with Matt, just tell us a little bit about, what you do, how you help people, a little bit of, what people can expect when they reach out to you.
Yeah. So what I suggest that you do first, I have a team of researchers, and we write a newsletter every day. And if you go to dailymedicaldiscoveries.com, it'll ask you if you want to join our list. And then I'll get your listeners a copy of a book I'm coming out with. It's been written. It's just going to be probably $29.95 on Amazon, called Masculine Maximizer, which kind of shows a man how to get everything that he really wants in life using a sex drive. And a lot of the things we've talked about is just the tip of the iceberg. Right. And I'll send that for free to anybody that wants it at dailymedicaldiscoveries.com. Now, when you get the emails from me, I've had like 700,000 people on my list. But if you reply and you ask a question, I'm happy to answer you. My team will send me your question. And I love talking to people on this on email. It's completely confidential. I always, we have a very strict privacy policy, and I can help you with whatever your question is. So the best thing is to go to dailymedicaldiscoveries.com, enter your email when it asks you, and then I'll get you a copy of Masculine Maximizer, and feel free to ask questions. You'll love the newsletter. It's just been great. It's all sorts of stuff you're not going to hear anywhere else, not just around sex, but around health in general.
Absolutely love it. So we will include all of that information in the show note. Please don't suffer in silence. If you're not satisfied with the way things are going for you as an individual, or, dating or getting married, or within your marriage because of the addiction that pornography has on you, or the addiction of self-pleasuring, please, please, please reach out, get help. It will
or you can't get an erection, or you're concerned about anxiety around having sex in the future, whatever it is, definitely reach out to me. Just reply to any of the emails and I'd be happy to help.
Absolutely. That's great help, everybody. So thank you for being here, Matt. Any final tip for the rest, for our listeners? Anything, suggestion? You don't like the word advice, so I wouldn't use it. So anything that you
for men, just try to go a few days. You might masturbate as normal or have intercourse, but just don't come and just see where that gets you.
That is a tall ask.
I mean, it's not that difficult, but
and
it causes pain. Yeah, you learn how to relax that area. I teach that, as a man, you relax the area of the pelvic floor. It's very simple to do. And then you don't have a blue balls. You don't have a vasocongestive, painful feeling afterwards. Right. But it's definitely very, very helpful to open up the world. You go, I never thought about that. That's kind of cool.
Yeah. All right. Good recommendation. Try it out. And if it doesn't work, I'll make sure you have his information so you can contact him.
Perfect. It's been a great pleasure being on your show. I really appreciate your wonderful questions and your cultural observations are just been amazing. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you.
Really
Thank
appreciate
you for being here. I absolutely love having these conversations because people are naturally curious. People naturally have a problem. But again, some people are scared of being judged. Some people do not know where to turn. So that's why I value this level of conversation. And the questions that I ask are naturally curious questions, either from what I've heard, seen, observed, or been at a loss for answers for, right? So I really do appreciate you bringing on your expertise and answering these questions in a way that everybody can understand, in a way that people can actually feel comfortable about seeking help. So I thank you so much for being here. It was a pleasure.
My pleasure.
Yeah. So depending on how much the audience engage, you might want to come back. So I'm just letting you know. So
perfect. I would look forward to it. I have a lot of stuff, millions of things that I haven't even touched on here.
I love it. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Let us know what you thought about this episode. Engage, all right? Give us feedback if you'd like to hear more. This is what Matt does, and he's happy to help you. He's happy to help all of us. Let us know so we can come back and give you more. All right? Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Avik Beck's podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave us a review. It really helps us out. We'd love to hear your thoughts and continue the discussion. So join us on social media or drop us a message. Until next time, keep exploring, stay curious, and keep pushing the boundaries of your world.